$66,000. That's what the average person paid for a new full-size pickup truck in late 2025. Not a specialty rig, not a custom build. The average, the middle of the road, the one sitting on the lot right now with the sticker in the window. Meanwhile, somewhere in a field or a barn or parked behind a shop, there's an old truck, a square body Chevy from 1979, a Ford F100 from 1965, a Dodge D-Series from 1972, quietly becoming worth more every single year. Not because someone decided it should be, because the market found out what the people who've been wrenching on these things already knew. The old truck isn't a liability. It's one of the smartest things you can own right now. And I'm not talking about sentimental value. I'm not talking about nostalgia or the way it makes you feel on a Sunday morning. I'm talking about hard numbers, auction results, insurance valuations, the gap between what these trucks sold for 10 years ago and what they're pulling today. It's real money, and it's moving in one direction. There are 5 reasons this is happening, and they connect to each other in ways that don't get explained clearly. By the time we're done here, you're going to understand not just what's happening in the truck market, but why and what it means if you happen to be sitting on one of these things. Let me be straight about one thing before we start. I'm not saying every old pickup truck is a gold mine. There are plenty of tired, beat to death examples out there that aren't worth the argument over the title. What I am saying is that the good ones, the solid ones, the ones that have been maintained or are restorable, are sitting at a genuinely different place in the market than they were 5 years ago, and that gap is going to keep widening. Here's why. The first reason is the one that makes every other reason possible. New trucks have become so expensive that they've created a vacuum underneath themselves. Think about what $66,000 means in practical terms. That's a mortgage payment in some parts of the country. That's 4 years of college. And that's the average shuksa, meaning half the trucks sold cost more than that. The F-150, America's best-selling vehicle for 49 consecutive years, as of 2025, can start under $40,000 in its base configuration, but 5 of its 8 trim levels push past $65,000 once you add the required fees. The Denali, the Limited, the High Country, the trucks people actually want. They've become luxury products with a truck body bolted on. This didn't happen overnight. New vehicle prices rose just 2.3% total across the entire stretch from 1999 to 2019, a full 2 decades of relative stability. Then the pandemic hit, supply chains fractured, inventory dried up, and manufacturers discovered something they couldn't undiscover. People would pay almost anything if the alternative was no truck at all. Average transaction prices for new vehicles jumped from around $42,000 in late 2020 to roughly $47,000 just 1 year later, and they never came back down. They kept climbing. By September 2025, the average price paid for any new vehicle in America crossed $50,000 for the first time in history. The full-size pickup average was already $15,000 ahead of that. That matters to the old truck market because it pushes a huge pool of buyers backward in time. Someone who came in wanting a new Silverado ran the numbers and felt their stomach dropping. That person is now looking at a 2003 F-250 or a clean 1987 C10 or a mid-90s Toyota. The demand that used to buy new is now competing for old, and old trucks don't get made anymore. That brings us to the second reason. Supply doesn't recover. Here's the thing about a 1973 Chevy C10. Chevrolet built a lot of them. They ran the square body generation all the way through 1987. 14 years of production. At the time, they were work trucks, not collectibles. People used them hard. They got into accidents. They rusted. They got crushed. A lot of them just got used until there was nothing left to use. The ones that survived 4 decades of that are the ones you're seeing sell at auction right now. And the number of decent survivors goes down every year, not up. There's no factory restarting. There's no recall of supply. If a solid square body gets totaled today, the world has 1 fewer of them. That's the fundamental arithmetic that drives classic markets over time, and it's accelerating. The trucks that were already collectible have been collecting for years. The ones that were on the edge of that, the mid-90s stuff, the early OBD era trucks, are now crossing over because they're old enough and because the drivers who grew up with them have the money to chase them. Hagerty, which tracks collector vehicle values across thousands of makes and models, reported in 2024 that classic truck values had appreciated roughly 20% over the prior 5 years, outperforming many other collector vehicle segments. That's a 5-year average. Some individual trucks did much better. A 1991 Chevrolet 454 SS, a factory muscle truck with a 7.4-liter big block V8, built in just under 17,000 units across its 4-year run, was valued by Hagerty at around $23,000 in 2019. By early 2026, the same truck in excellent condition was pulling about $60,000. That's a 155% gain in 7 years. Mint examples have cleared 6 figures at auction. I want to be clear that I'm quoting those numbers from Hagerty's published valuations, and auction results can vary significantly depending on who's in the room on a given day. Not every 454 SS is going to auction for 60 grand. Condition matters enormously, but the direction is consistent, and the 454 SS isn't special in this regard. It's an example of a pattern you can see across dozens of models. The third reason is one that almost nobody talks about directly, and it's arguably the most important one for the long haul. Old trucks are not locked. Bear with me here for a moment because this gets a little technical, but I'll make it worth it. A modern pickup truck, any new full-size truck you can buy today, is not primarily a mechanical vehicle. It is a computer that happens to move. The engine control module, the transmission control module, the braking system, the climate control, the steering response, all of it is managed by electronic control units that communicate with each other constantly. There can be a dozen or more of these modules in a single modern truck, and they talk to each other over protocols that the manufacturers wrote and the manufacturers control. When something goes wrong, you need someone to talk to those modules. You need scan tools that can access the data. On a modern truck, that increasingly means going to a dealership because the diagnostic access is gated. Some manufacturers have built hardware modules directly into the vehicle that block unauthorized diagnostic tools. One major automaker uses an authentication system on its diagnostic ports that blocks independent scan tools unless they're registered through the manufacturer's own infrastructure. The stated reason is cybersecurity. The practical effect is that your local independent shop, the one you've trusted for 20 years, the one that charges you half what the dealer does, can't get into the truck's brain. Independent repair shops have historically handled about 80% of out-of-warranty repairs because dealerships are roughly 36% more expensive on average. That's not a small gap. That's the difference between a manageable bill and a month of groceries. And right now, that independent shop is losing access to the work. Vehicle maintenance and repair costs rose 36% between 2022 and 2026, according to Bureau of Labor Statistics data, with costs climbing 6% in 2026 alone. The complexity of the machines is part of that. The gatekeeping of diagnostic information is another part. These aren't separate forces, they're the same force. Projections suggest that by 2035, if the current trend holds, about 155 million vehicle owners will be affected by limited repair choices, with average annual repair bills rising by roughly $200 per vehicle per year. Across the whole population, that's more than $30 billion a year flowing toward dealership service departments instead of independent shops or your own garage. Now think about your old truck. A 1979 Chevy K10 has a carburetor, a distributor, mechanical fuel delivery, a wiring harness you can trace with your eyes. There is no security gateway. There is no proprietary diagnostic module. There is no manufacturer between you and the problem. You can buy a repair manual, get it out on a Saturday afternoon, and fix almost anything that truck will ever throw at you. Not because the technology is primitive. The small block V8 in that truck is one of the most refined, most thoroughly understood engines ever built, but because the people who designed it built it to be worked on. That was a value they held, consciously or not, and it's one that the current generation of vehicles has quietly abandoned. That's worth money now, and it's going to be worth more money as the alternative gets harder and more expensive. People are running the math on what their new truck will cost them over 10 years in maintenance. Dealership-only diagnostics, proprietary parts, software updates they can't opt out of, and some of them are starting to prefer the certainty of something they can understand. If you're the one still on the fence about whether the old truck is worth keeping, here's something I want you to sit with. Take what a major service visit costs at a dealership for a modern pickup. We're talking a diagnostic visit for anything beyond routine oil and filters. Figure $500 to $1,000 before they even touch a part. Now, think about what that same diagnostic situation looks like on a truck, where you can pull the timing cover in your driveway. The math is not complicated. Before the fourth reason, if you found any of this useful, and there's quite a bit more to get through, hitting subscribe costs nothing, and make sure the next one finds you. There's a reason the old mechanics understood things about ownership that the finance office would rather you not think about, and we're getting to that. The fourth reason is the aftermarket. This is actually something that surprised me when I started looking at it seriously. You might think the oldest trucks would have the hardest time getting parts. In some cases, that's true. Genuinely rare vehicles with low production numbers can be brutal for sourcing. But for the most popular platforms, the square body Chevy, the first and second generation F-Series, the classic Toyota pickups. The aftermarket is more robust right now than it has ever been. Not the same as when the trucks were new, better. The Chevy square body, running from 1973 through 1987, is the most popular classic truck platform in America by most measures, and the ecosystem around it reflects that. Panel interchangeability is strong across most of the production run. Most body panels cross-reference between 1973 and 1987 with minor variation. The small block 350 V8 that came in millions of these trucks has arguably more aftermarket support than any other engine in automotive history, with decades of performance development, fuel injection conversion kits, modernized suspension geometry, everything. Companies that weren't alive when the truck was built are now manufacturing reproduction interior parts made in the USA to factory correct specs. You can buy a complete replacement wiring harness. You can convert the carburetor to fuel injection with a bolt-on kit. You can install modern disc brakes, all the way around. You can drop in an LS engine that makes 400 horsepower and gets better fuel economy than the original, with a conversion kit designed specifically for the platform. The old truck, in other words, doesn't have to stay old in the ways that matter least. It can stay old in the ways that matter most: simple architecture, mechanical accessibility, no subscription required, while getting updated where you actually want it to be modern. That's the restomod formula, and it's why a well-executed 1972 C10 can sell for north of $200,000 today. That's not a misprint. A truck that originally sold for a few $1,000s in modified form is clearing prices that put it above a lot of exotic cars on the used market. Now, I want to be honest about something here. Not every old truck is a candidate for that kind of build. A restomod at that level takes real money and sometimes more than a new truck. And real skill. Unrestored original survivors have their own market, but the condition premium is brutal. A barn find truck with a solid frame and honest rust is not the same as a solid driver with fresh undercoating. If you're looking at an old truck as an investment, condition determines almost everything. And the cost to get a rough truck to a good truck can eat the margin entirely if you're not doing the work yourself. That's not a reason to avoid the market, but it's a reason to go in with clear eyes. The fifth reason is one I honestly wasn't thinking about when I started researching this, but it kept coming up. The demographic wave. The people who grew up riding in the backseat of a 1985 K10 are now in their 40s. The ones who helped their dad pull the engine in a 1969 F100 are retirement age. The money that the collector car market follows is generational. It chases the memories of the people who have finally accumulated enough wealth to act on them. For most of the 20th century, that meant the muscle car era. Pre-war iron, European sports cars from the 50s and 60s. Classic truck values were low for a long time because trucks were work, not nostalgia. That's changed, and it's changed permanently. What I didn't fully appreciate until I saw the data is that a younger wave is also entering the market. Buyers in their late 20s and 30s who want something they can actually work on. Something with character, something that doesn't require a software update to start. Hagerty's CEO noted publicly that this buyer group is looking for vehicles they can afford to enter the collector world with, and that old trucks represent one of the few remaining entry points where the floor is still reachable. You can buy a project quality square body for $5,000 to $10,000 in most markets. You can't do that with a 1969 Camaro anymore. Those have been priced out of the entry level range for years. That means the pressure on decent old trucks is coming from two directions at once: established collectors with money and younger enthusiasts who want in. Supply goes down every year. Demand goes up. The market understands what this means, even when the people involved don't say it out loud. Now, let me talk about what's actually coming for you, because there's something in this picture that deserves more attention than it gets. When you go to buy a new truck, the transaction is designed to put distance between you and the real cost of ownership. The sticker price is the starting point for a negotiation that never quite ends. There's the dock fee, the extended warranty you probably don't need but feel anxious refusing, the gap insurance, the protection packages, the finance rate that the dealership controls and from which they earn money. The dealer margin on a high-spec new pickup truck can be substantial, and virtually none of the people involved in that transaction have an incentive to make the total cost easy to see. What you may not have been told clearly is this: A new pickup truck at $66,000 financed at a typical rate over 72 months costs you something like $90,000 by the time the last payment clears, and the moment it's yours, the depreciation clock starts. A new truck loses roughly 15 to 20% of its value in the first year. That $66,000 truck is worth maybe $53,000 to $56,000 by the end of year one. The gap between what you paid and what you own is not disclosed anywhere in the purchase agreement. It's just the math of how new vehicle ownership works, and nobody at the dealership is putting it on the whiteboard. Meanwhile, the person who bought a clean square body C10 5 years ago for $18,000 and spent $6,000 bringing it up to a solid driver, $24,000 in total, is looking at a truck with a current market value somewhere between $30,000 and $50,000, depending on the build and condition, trending upward. They can work on it themselves. Their mechanic can work on it. There's no proprietary diagnostic gate between them and the problem. Their insurance through a specialty insurer reflects the agreed value rather than book value, and the premium is meaningfully lower than a standard policy because classic vehicles don't sit in parking lots getting door dinged at the grocery store every Tuesday. The information gap here isn't an accident. Nobody profits from you understanding the total cost of a new truck over its ownership life cycle. The finance office profits from the complexity. The service department profits from the recurring revenue. The manufacturer profits from the replacement cycle. That's not a conspiracy. It's just where the incentives point. And the single best defense against it is understanding what a vehicle actually costs you from purchase to sale, not just on the sticker. There's a larger thing worth saying here, and then we'll get to what this means practically. The old mechanics, the ones who built their knowledge in a time when you could diagnose a problem with your ears and your hands, operated with a principle that's getting harder to find in a modern dealership service department. The principle is that a machine you understand is a machine you control, not just financially, in terms of time and planning and the quiet confidence that comes from not being dependent on someone else's software to keep your vehicle alive. A truck you can fix is not the same thing as a truck you own on paper. There's a version of ownership that's real and a version that's conditional. The conditional version comes with a monthly payment, a warranty that expires, and a diagnostic port that somebody else holds the key to. The real version is grease on your hands and a vehicle that keeps running because you understand why it runs. The old trucks represent that second kind of ownership more completely than anything rolling off a lot today. That's not sentiment. That's a feature, and the market is starting to price it in. So let's be practical about what this means if you're actually sitting on an old truck or thinking about getting into one. If you already own one, the first thing to do is stop treating it like a liability. Get it appraised, not by a dealer, by a specialty insurer like Haggerty, which maintains a database of over 40,000 collector vehicles and can give you a current market value based on real sales data. If the truck is insured on a standard auto policy, it's almost certainly underinsured, and it's being depreciated on paper when the actual market value has been moving in the other direction. Get a guaranteed value policy. It's typically cheaper than standard coverage for a vehicle that isn't being driven daily, and it protects the real number. If the truck needs work, prioritize the structural stuff first. Frame, floors, cab corners. Rust is the only thing that kills these trucks for good because everything else is fixable. The drivetrain components, engine, transmission, axles, have enormous aftermarket support, a fresh 350 crate engine with modern tolerances runs under $3,000. A complete brake conversion to disc on all four corners can be done for a similar number. These aren't expensive fixes relative to what the resulting truck is worth. If you're shopping for one, know what you're walking into. The square body Chevy and the first generation Dodge D series are probably the most popular platforms right now in terms of parts availability and community support. The Ford F100 and early F series have a massive following and exceptional body restoration support. Toyota pickups from the 1980s, particularly four-wheel drive examples, have seen appreciation that would have been hard to predict even 10 years ago. Their reputation for surviving everything is earned, and it shows in the values. For any of these, buy the best one you can find rather than the cheapest one that can be made good. The math almost always favors paying up for condition. If you're looking at something from the early 90s through mid 2000s, the market is still in the early stages of discovering those trucks. Values are lower, parts are plentiful because some of them are still used as daily drivers, and the appreciation curve is likely still ahead of them rather than behind. That's a different kind of opportunity than the classic market, and the investment thesis is more about usefulness now and value later rather than value now. Here's the moment I want you to picture 5 years from now. Someone at work, someone who just signed papers on a new truck, $70,000, 6-year loan, asks you offhand what you drive. You tell them, old truck, a 78 K10 runs great. Did most of the work myself. They look at you the way people look at someone who they think is being frugal to a fault, maybe a little quaint. And then you tell them what Haggerty's current valuation says it's worth, and you watch the math land on their face. You didn't time the market. You just understood something that wasn't obvious at the time, and you stayed with it. That's the thing about knowledge that pays off slowly. It's invisible right up until it isn't. Drop your truck in the comments out make, model, year, what it needed, when you got it, and what it's actually cost you. Not the sticker price. The real number, soup to nuts. Everything you put into it, I want to know what people are actually experiencing out there, because the range is enormous and the specifics are what make it real. If you bought a rough one and turned it around, tell me what that cost. If you've owned one since the factory, I especially want to hear from you. There are threads in this topic I barely got to. The specific insurance mechanics for collector vehicles and how the agreed value calculation actually works. The right to repair fight that's happening right now in Congress and what it means for the people caught in the middle, what the tariff situation is actually doing to parts prices for both old trucks and new. Every one of those is its own conversation, and I'm not done yet. There's more where this came from. If you want to be there for those, subscribe. It's free, and you can undo it whenever you feel like it. I'm going to keep digging. Take care of your trucks. Sinosikum, their postscript report, we didn't chat, not in script. On Dodi Baki on work count, Sakamitan, 4.5 down, 10 words. A runtime at 160 WPM, Mustang, Toipu, 128.2 minutes, hit target. Rotating slots use a culture for operator log, may dawan wal open number that shouldn't be true. Sasupari doctor intern and information vacuum duam. Pay off your future conversation. Comment their own experience. Daksam philosophy, yes. Longest section. The mechanism of our body, reason 3, right to repair, does locked diagnostics, 6 times 2 words. In the shortest section, reason 2, supply doesn't recover, but on to 280 words. A symmetry mandate, met. Items vary significantly from 280 to 650 words.